Okay, so welcome everyone to today's career profile interview from Net Impact Boston. My name is Lawrence Wilson, and today we are joined by Lauren Phipps. Welcome, Lauren. Thank you very much for coming along to speak with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. So I guess just to kind of kick off, do you maybe want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your career journey so far?
Absolutely. So I spent 6 years at the media and events company called GreenBiz Group. In my last role there, I was the vice president and senior analyst on the circular economy. I convened the largest conference on circularity in North America. I wrote a weekly newsletter on the topic, and really my focus was on understanding the opportunities within the idea of a circular economy and figuring out how do we help advance those, specifically kind of centered on the corporate audience. But I'm currently a master's student at the Yale School of the Environment, studying business and industrial ecology. And I am very excited to be in a transition process, shifting from sort of convening and understanding into hopefully applying some of those principles to all of the work of addressing climate change.
Nice, fantastic. It does sound very exciting, and I know we'll get to your educational step shortly. But I guess first off, because maybe the concept of circularity and the circular economy might be new to some of our listeners, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about what that is?
Absolutely. So pretty simply, there's kind of three core principles that have been coalesced around. The first is the idea of how do we design out waste and pollution from our industrial systems from the onset. So rather than managing waste better or thinking just about, okay, how do we recycle something, which is oftentimes downcycling something, how do we think from the onset in the way that we source materials, in the way that we design products, in the way that we design our entire systems? How do we do so with great intention and with great foresight into what will happen at the next phase of a material or an item's journey through life, if you will. So designing out waste and pollution is one piece. Second piece is keeping our stuff at its highest and best use. So rather than just having something and getting a new one once it's sort of reached a point of failure, so maybe it's jeans that have a hole in them, how do we figure out at scale how to ensure repair and product life extension happens? And whether it's a building material or a piece of clothing or a piece of electronics or lithium that goes into a battery, how do we keep those materials in circulation and at their best use rather than being downgraded? And all of this is wrapped up in the third principle of regenerating living systems and thinking about climate change at the end of the day and contextualizing all of this within social good and with environmental well-being as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, fantastic. That's really interesting. So, I guess how did your sort of your interest in the topic, how did that first kind of develop?
I think, like most people in their career, it was a little bit random. I went to undergrad a wonderful liberal arts school called Pitzer College in Southern California and had these ideas about, okay, first starting thinking about environmental justice really through kind of a social lens, then getting introduced to the idea of business for good and thinking about international social enterprise and spending some time in Guatemala and in West Africa, learning about different tools for promoting sustainability at small scales and marrying that with business. And then getting this idea about corporate sustainability, but really at the time having no idea what that meant. So I had a wonderful opportunity to join the team at GreenBiz, thinking, okay, this is something that theoretically and conceptually, these are the words and ideas that I'm interested in. But I started in sales there. I did not have what I would call many marketable skills outside of critical thinking and pretty decent writing skills. So I joined the sales team and had an awesome time at the company, which was quickly growing and expanding its markets. And after a couple of years, the company was getting to a place where circular economy had really been emerging as a increasing area of focus for businesses, in addition to thinking about energy and mobility and more the governance side of sustainability and the social side. Circularity was this term and phrase that kept coming up, and so it was really being in the right place at the right time, and having the relationships and trust at my former organization to say, hey, you want to figure out what this means for us and for the corporate sustainability profession as a whole. And I said, sure, that sounds fun. I don't really know what that is at the time, I thought to myself, but 4 years later, I was in a place where I really knew quite a bit, and here I am now at my next phase of my career journey, thinking about how to go even deeper in these really lofty and important concepts.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So I guess you sort of got your foot in the door, and then were able to kind of carve out your own niche, as it were. So I know you spent a few years as an analyst and a senior analyst around the sort of circular economy at GreenBiz. What was your sort of like kind of day-to-day work in that sense? I mean, was it more research based, or was it more, how does that work?
It was many different things. Working at a media company is unique, but it's also really the same as anywhere else, where our work product and the thing we were doing, it wasn't writing a book, it wasn't creating a product, it wasn't creating a new coalition necessarily, it was putting on a big conference and writing a weekly, essentially essay or op-ed on some facet of circularity. So how do you do any of those things? You start by learning. And so every day I would talk to usually 2, 3, 4 different people, whether it was kind of partner organizations or experts in the field, depending on whether I wanted to be building out a session on reusable packaging, or something on modular design, or something on sustainable building materials, and something on I don't know, so many topics under the sun, clothing rental, for example. So a lot of talking to people externally, and in that sort of trying to synthesize ideas and understand both what is the landscape of what people are talking about within this circular economy framework, and then beyond that, kind of what are the areas of opportunity within certain industries that maybe aren't using that language yet. So in addition to connecting with folks externally, really trying to build new partnerships and relationships and get people sort of bought into this concept in the form of coming to speak at our event, or in the form of letting me interview them for a story. And then sort of this other piece of that work in terms of just the internal mechanics of how do you convene thousands of people, both in person and during COVID virtually. So working across the matrix organization to figure out, okay, what stories are we telling, and how are we marketing this opportunity to people, and how are we finding sponsors that want to align themselves with this concept and opportunity, and how do we make that valuable for them in a way that allows us to keep doing this work. Those are some of the ways that I got to engage, but it's kind of hard to whittle down a very dynamic role into what it looked like every day, because it definitely changed day to day.
Oh, fair enough. And did you find that that your work and these kind of ideas, I mean, were they sort of picked up pretty happily by the sort of wider ecosystem, by the public or government or business or whatever it was?
I think it's the same question in many ways as would we say that sustainability is being picked up by wider organizations and institutions. In many ways, yes. In many ways, no. And it's far more a matter of how than if. I think on the upside, the momentum around circularity was and continues to be incredibly strong as companies and countries think about their climate impact and strategy in a really more holistic way, and think about materials, and think about, what do I need to future proof within my supply chain, and what do I need to think about in terms of consumer engagement and opportunities for greater impact when it comes to, I mentioned clothing rental before, maybe I'm going to have a whole new number of customers that will engage with me if they can rent clothing or if they can buy used clothing, for example, or if I offer repair. So there's so much opportunity, and many companies that are increasingly starting to understand what that opportunity looks like, both from a risk mitigation as well as a opportunity standpoint. And then on the other end of things, perhaps with a more cynical lens, I think there's plenty of companies that might be and might have aligned with this really nice concept and story of circularity without much groundedness in doing so with great intention. I think one example might be just this oversimplification of circularity as a synonym for recycling, and seeing a number of brands and plastics and packaging companies that might be using the circular economy language when they only mean a pretty minimal part of their value chain when it comes to enabling recycling in certain contexts, perhaps at a slightly higher rate than we have right now. And while that's necessarily an important building block of circularity, it certainly can't stand on its own as an example of the system that we want to be building.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. And so would you say that that's sort of one of the larger kind of challenges facing this kind of work, is that I don't want to say like greenwashing, but that sort of like half-hearted sort of take up?
I wouldn't say it's my primary concern. I think if it helps create awareness, greenwashing is simply a phase within a broader kind of emergence of trends and of change. I think something can begin to be trendy, and it can be taken on by companies in perhaps a half-hearted way, but in many cases I see that as a step towards broader adoption, perhaps an early signal of we might really have something here. I think the bigger concern that I have and the bigger opportunity is just around policy. I think in many ways, when it comes to sustainability and climate action, businesses are the ones to make change first, and policy often follows behind, at least within the US context, which I'm most familiar with. And if we're thinking about extended producer responsibility, for example, as one key policy lever that we know works, that we have a pretty good understanding of, both within packaging, within other product systems, policy needs to be the leader in this. Otherwise, the economics may not make sense for companies to shift fully to recycled content and to creating more large scale opportunities for curbside recycling, for example, when it comes to consumer packaging. But I think by and large, the policy lever, whether we're thinking about packaging recyclability or any other topic, is really the biggest limiting factor, and I think could be the most catalytic opportunity for change.
Okay, oh, that's really interesting. And so I suppose that the idea that like sort of policy is the thing that's really going to drive this, was that one of the motivations for you when it came to going back to school, when it came to sort of moving back into education? Was that one of your motivations?
No.
Well, fair enough.
I guess I mean to say that policy could and would be the biggest driver, but I remain rather skeptical, at least in the near term. So I still see businesses at the forefront of innovation and at the forefront of strategic thinking around their circular economy strategies. I think that there's just so much opportunity, at least in the near term, for corporate leadership. So that is really what was behind my interest in going back to school and thinking, okay, these are awesome ideas. I think it's pretty hard to argue with this lovely vision of a circular system in which everything flows and goes back into our system and it all is well and good. But in practice, there's so many cases in which there's just hard decisions and there's trade-offs to be made of impact and money, and really those are the two big ones. And I wanted to be in a position where I could learn how to make those hard choices and navigate those trade-offs, and really be in a role to implement some of these lovely ideas in a way that actually has some on the ground impact.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really interesting. So yeah, so now that we're on the topic, I suppose, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about your move back into education? I mean, we've obviously covered the motivations a little bit there, but like, I mean, what is the program that you're doing, and what does that sort of involve?
So I am at the Yale School of the Environment. It's a professional program. It's a Master's of Environmental Management, which uses a pretty holistic lens, and it's rather kind of challenged by choice in terms of the direction you want to take, but grounding in kind of the science of it all when it comes to sustainability. And there's the opportunity to specialize as you see fit. So my interest in coming back to again apply some of these ideas, and I wanted to focus in on a specific industry or value chain that I think would really benefit from this type of thinking. So I am focusing in on industrial ecology, which is essentially the science of circular economy and understanding, okay, how much material is moving where and what's the impact of it, and how do we think about everything from life cycle assessment to material flow analysis to greenhouse gas accounting and all of sort of the measurement side of things, while also focusing on business and putting that within a kind of corporate context. And my focus specifically right now, I've become increasingly really fascinated with the material side of decarbonization. So as we think about the transition to clean energy, much focus is on the type of energy we're using, whether it's wind or solar or others and EVs. And I'm quite interested in, okay, if we're going to do that, how do we make sure that the materials that we need to undergo that transition and underpin that pivot are not actually recreating the same challenges of a fossil-based economy as we shift to a mineral-intensive one. I think people are pretty familiar with cobalt and increasingly lithium and nickel and aluminum and all these metals and minerals that we really need to decarbonize. And that whole mess is quite complex and increasingly ripe for investigation. And I'm excited to be mixed up in it.
No, it does sound very exciting. And presumably then, is that the direction that you hope to sort of move into after you've graduated, into that sort of industrial ecology space?
Yes, I candidly am figuring out which piece of this broader puzzle I want to fit myself into, whether it's within a larger company, whether it's on the financing side, whether it's sort of in the industry enablement kind of third party space, but some role focused on materials and decarbonization, whether it's in the automotive industry or energy industry or electronics and tech generally. So we shall see, but these are the things that I'm thinking about, and I think no shortage of places I can apply these concepts.
That's good. Education is often quite good like that, isn't it? It gives you that sort of opportunity to take a step back and kind of assess your options in a broader sense. Was it so? Yeah, I wanted to ask actually. Was it reasonably easy to find type of qualification that you were looking for? Or are there a lot of sort of masters in environmental management out there, or did you find that these concepts and these qualifications are reasonably limited?
There are a quickly growing number of schools that offer master's programs with some facet of climate or sustainability really wrapped up in them. I only applied to one program, and this is the program I applied to because I think I was uniquely positioned to feel no need to go to school, but only kind of this want. I relied so much on sort of perspective and communication skills, and in many ways rhetoric, to communicate the complexity of systems change when it comes to circular economy. And I really wanted to ground myself in the hard skills. I don't think that we're gonna address climate change in any meaningful way without the math and science of it all. And I wanted to ground myself in that. And there's plenty of ways to do that, and plenty of amazing institutions, both within kind of the climate context and beyond. The Yale School of the Environment has been around for quite a while, and it is really nicely nestled next to the School of Management, the business school at Yale, and you have the opportunity to learn using so many different lenses. There's my advisor and professor is Paul Anastas, who's one of the fathers of green chemistry. Amazing person to learn from. The person that basically started the field of industrial ecology, industrial symbiosis specifically, is Marion Chertow, and I get to see her every other day. There's such a lineup of deep experts and opportunity to use so many resources here, that I decided this was the place that I personally felt like aligned with my values. But depending on if you're more interested in conservation or more interested in water or urban sustainability or whatever, there's a number of different great programs that can sort of help you achieve those goals.
Nice. It sounds like an incredibly inspirational environment. Absolutely. I also wanted to ask actually about some of your volunteering work. Specifically your work as a board member for the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network. I know I think a lot of our listeners may hear the term board member and maybe they're a bit sort of intimidated by it. It seems like a very senior thing. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about, like, how you got involved with that and what does that involve?
I think that board member is a term, well, I will speak for myself in this, that can either overstate or understate what you really do. And in this case, I definitely don't think it should be thought of as anything intimidating. I had the brilliant opportunity of being in the right place at the right time and knowing the right people as this really brilliant organization, the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network, was getting off the ground. I had a number of close partner organizations that I was collaborating with to build the Circularity Conference. And I kept hearing over a couple of weeks that there's this thing brewing. Dave Ford, who's the executive director, I believe is his title. He was pulling together this network of leading organizations, both activist as well as industry, to launch this, what started as an experience really, to bring people together on a ship in the Sargasso Sea that worked across the plastics value chain to come together for essentially a week of understanding and work and reconciliation as we think about the complexity of the ocean plastics challenge. I somehow weaseled my way onto that ship and was part of the initial group of people involved in bringing this summit to life. And it was an amazing opportunity that I am incredibly grateful to have had, and to have gotten to collaborate closely with the convening organization and so many member organizations of it, was really, really amazing. So I think in this case, the board member piece is the language they used for those a part of the initial convening that sort of helped anchor these conversations. And it was an amazing opportunity that I, unfortunately, as I've shifted slightly away from my work around plastics, and less involved in right now.
It sounds absolutely fantastic, and I mean, I'm sure it was very well deserved as well. All right, we seem to be coming towards the end of our time, so I have just a couple of extra questions, and the first would be that if you could offer sort of one piece of advice or one top tip for someone who is starting out their career at the moment and who looks at your career and thinks, that's the kind of work that I want to get into, what would that be? What would your piece of advice be?
I think my big piece of advice is to talk to as many people that fascinate you as you can. People within the sustainability industry as a whole. I think throughout my relatively short career so far, I've found are just the most kind and generous and lovely human beings. And I really want to spend always more time with the people that I really like, and find that people are just so eager to generously share their time and experience when they have the capacity to do so. So I am still in the practice of reaching out to people on LinkedIn or people that I meet at events. If I think what they do sounds interesting, just saying, hey, do you have 15, 20 minutes? Would you be willing to let me pick your brain? And it is rarely time poorly spent. I think it's always a wonderful practice to be in that leads to so many wonderful connections and continued conversations. So continuing to just talk to people that fascinate you and really focusing in on the relational side of career creating and crafting rather than just about, okay, what's the title and who's the person. I think centering in on the human side is what keeps me going for sure.
Fantastic. And I mean that generosity you're paying forward by speaking to us today. So thank you very much. We really do appreciate you taking the time to share your story. Just finally, is there anything you wanted to share with the Net Impact Network? You know, any events coming up or projects that you're working on?
I would be remiss not to promote the Circularity Conference that GreenBiz hosts. It is in June. It's in Seattle this year. And if you're at all interested in the work of advancing the circular economy, it's an amazing place to connect and learn. I will definitely be there this year. And while I don't lead the conference anymore, I can't speak more highly of it, though I am biased. So definitely go to the Circularity Conference or join virtually if you can't make it there in person.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put up a link when we put up this recording as well. But that's all the time we have for today. So thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us. And thank you everyone else for listening. We hope to speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.